Right. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Coach's Corner here at Best FC. Coach Brian, technical director here at Best FC, and our guest, Coach Nabil. He's been on before. Coach
Yep.
Nabil coaches multiple teams within our organization. He's a full-time coach here at Best FC, and he's also our director for our academy programs, our younger programs. And so, always a good opportunity to talk soccer with Coach Nabil. So. Today's episode is going to be all about talking player development, and there's obviously a lot
Yeah.
of variables that go in that. So
hmm
we'll try to touch on as many as we can given the time, and
hmm
just have a good conversation. We may agree and we may disagree, but it's
Yeah.
always good
See.
for families and players to have a better understanding when it comes to player development, when it comes to
Mhm.
the aspects that kind of make up player development. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's dive right in it, Coach Nabil. We're gonna. I'll start off just by asking you some simple questions and just getting your perspective from it.
Okay.
What to you? What's important when it comes to player development at the younger ages? So obviously you run our U9, U10 level programs. You obviously coach older teams. At
Yeah.
those younger ages, what are you really focusing on?
I would say when we're talking about the psychological aspects, we need to give those players as much confidence as we can, and we need to support them in whatever they do during the game or sessions, especially when they do mistakes. Because these days, do a mistake, you feel bad about it. You don't know how to maybe adapt to it or cope with it. So, as coaches and as parents, it's our job to support those players, especially when they do mistakes, and not even support them, to encourage them to do mistakes. That's how they're gonna get better. So, by supporting and give them all the confidence, that's gonna help them improve as players and as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, for the families or players out there that might not necessarily know this, there's four pillars that we look at when it comes to player development, right? So we've got the technical,
Mhm.
obviously what you can do physically with the ball,
Yeah,
your technical ability. We have the tactical, so the
yeah,
understanding of the game, the soccer IQ,
yeah,
field awareness, that sort of thing. We have the physical component. So obviously what you can do physically as far as running, changing direction, strength, power, etc.
yeah,
And then we also obviously have what Coach Nabil just mentioned, the psychological piece. And it's funny at all ages we talk about how this game is 85% mental, right? It's a big
exactly.
mental
Yeah.
game, but we also focus a lot on technique and technical development. You mentioned a
Mhm.
key word there, confidence. What does and obviously confidence falls under the psychological pillar of player development.
Yeah.
What does confidence have to do with technical development?
So confidence, and for me, I think psychological aspect. For me, it's the most important aspect. You could have the best player on your team. He could be the most technical player, but if he came in today and he's lacking that confidence, no matter what he does, it's not gonna work out for him. So for us, confidence is gonna help a lot with the technical aspect with the players. Because when they feel confident in doing a certain move, it could be step over, it could be scissor, it could be something as simple as just an outside cut. If they don't have that confidence to do those moves, they're gonna always struggle with applying and executing those moves, whether it's a session or in a game. So if we provide them with the confidence, they can do any move that you would assign them to do, whether it's very complex or very simple.
Yeah, no, excellent. And obviously, at the younger ages, we focus, I mean, throughout the entire club, but definitely at the younger ages for sure,
Yeah,
we focus a lot on technical development, right? You and I
yeah,
both come from that type of background, and as far as developing, high level technical players.
yeah.
And you mentioned, confidence is built through technical development. And I would agree with that. And I think, repetition, quality of touches,
Mhm.
if you tell somebody, hey, you need to do a step over a scissor in a game, and they've never executed one before, they have no idea even what you're talking about, how to
Exactly.
exit, what foot
Exactly.
to exit with, what part of the foot to exit with. They're not gonna feel comfortable, and obviously not gonna feel confident in doing it.
Yeah.
But obviously, the more reps and quality touches they get in the training session,
Yeah.
and the more focus on that technique, they'll be able to do it, right? So
Yeah,
it's funny, we have four separate pillars, but each of
mhm,
the pillars kind of correlate to the next one, right?
exactly.
Technical
They're all
development's
connected.
not
Yeah,
exactly the technical development's not going to happen if you're not confident. You're not going to build up your confidence if you're not focusing on your technical development, right?
yeah,
So,
that's
and you
right.
could really say that about all four pillars. So, um, there's many more variables that go in with this, and I want to dive into that. I think this is areas that are missed. So let's talk
Mhm,
about um, obviously us as coaches.
mhm.
How do you develop a player's confidence?
I would say first you have to build a connection with them so he can trust you in building that confidence. After that connection is done, is built, and there's trust between you, between the player and the coach, then the player is gonna trust the coach with whatever instructions he's gonna give him throughout his career or maybe throughout the season, as far as whether it's gonna be technical instructions, tactical instructions. When there's trust between players and coach, I think the whole team is gonna benefit from that, and that's gonna improve everyone in that team, including the coach. So that's how we build up the confidence in the player. Because when he and also moving into the technical aspect, as you said, the more repetition he does or they do, the better they're gonna get at that specific move or specific instruction that you assign them to, and then it's gonna be like second nature to them, and that's how you can help build that confidence.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. And I mean, obviously, you've been coaching club for quite some time. You've played for quite some time, and obviously, I have as well. It is, let's talk about the other side of this. We can sit here as coaches and talk about what we do personally in order to impact our players' confidence in a positive direction. But what have you seen as a coach or recognized as a coach that can negatively impact it? Maybe you've seen a coach this way in a game or in a training session. What have you recognized like, oof, that's crushing a kid's confidence?
I would say um, there's a fine line between a coach giving constructive criticism and just pure criticism for the player. If he just criticizes the player and everything he does, that player is not going to build that confidence that he needs to to succeed. But if he gives him uh, constructive criticism and asks him the right questions on how to improve or what can we do better, let's say he was in a defending situation, he can defend in 1v1. Okay, what can we do better to improve that? It's up to how the coach communicates that to his players. He needs to always offer them support and offer them like a safe place, a safe space for them to express and be comfortable in doing those mistakes so they can actually improve. And I would say one thing that also would help, that would affect the player's confidence is now we would move more into the family environment or maybe how the parents may affect that confidence as well, and that's something the coach can't always have control of, but he can always communicate that to his their parents if needed.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I mean, because we've seen it more times than not. I've seen it
Mhm,
obviously, as a director of multiple clubs. I've seen it in
mhm,
training, and then obviously as a coach on the sidelines,
mhm.
coaching against other coaches. There becomes this rather than kind of constructive criticism, there almost becomes this joystick piece or this constant negativity when the kid makes a mistake,
Yeah,
just screaming at the kid, hey, you should have done that. Hey, you should have done that. Hey,
exactly,
pick your head up when
exactly.
you do this. And like you said, there's a fine line, and there are moments where you want to correct or give feedback, but to
Yeah,
do it every moment that a kid makes a mistake
yeah,
is not going to support that player at all. And like you said,
yeah,
they're going to become so afraid of making
yeah,
mistakes and
mhm,
making choices that guess what? They don't make any decisions on the field,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And that's right, wrong, or indifferent. I strongly believe here in the U.S., I think on average, most kids, you know, quit youth sports, or we can even say quit soccer at that U13, U12,
yes,
maybe U14 age. And I think this is a big part of that, right? We're not
yeah,
supporting that player, not only in helping develop their confidence but also not helping their player development aspect as well. And
Exactly.
it becomes a massive issue. And again, I'm not saying as a coach that you shouldn't try to make corrections, but I think it's more important to identify when you make those corrections.
Yeah.
Obviously, both of us as USSF coaches and licenses, we talk about the game teaching the player,
Mhm.
right? As
Mhm.
coaches, we're supposed to guide that player through the process, but we have to let them
Yeah.
make mistakes.
Yeah.
Just like we would in regular, in our regular lives, we're going to make mistakes,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
we learn from those.
Yeah.
So no, that's a good point there, and I think that's something that we have to be cognizant of, coaches, to
Yeah.
make sure we're finding that balance. And again, we're all competitors, right? You grew up playing, I grew
That's
up
true.
playing. We're all
That's true.
competitors. We all want to have
Yeah.
success. We all want to win. But I think as a coach, there needs to be a little bit of different perspective. It's not just about winning; it's about actually developing that
Yeah.
player. So
Exactly.
when
Especially at
winning,
those younger ages. Yeah.
exactly, because then when winning
Especially.
matters, they're at the right
Yes.
mindset to try to find that success.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's talk about the other piece to that as well. So obviously, we've talked about trying to develop the player's confidence as an individual. Getting
Mhm.
more reps, being okay with making mistakes, being
Mhm.
comfortable with making mistakes. You and I, obviously, we run technical training sessions. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Just being comfortable with making mistakes. Or another thing I always say is be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right?
Yes.
If you're not putting yourself in that type of environment, then you're not giving yourself opportunities to grow. We talked about
Mhm.
the coaching aspect, how we as coaches can support those players as well. The other big piece to this is the parents, right?
Yes.
And this is never really talked about, right? And so,
Yeah.
you and I, you do a great job communicating with your teams. You and I have even worked at different clubs together.
Mhm.
You've always done a good job communicating with your teams. How do you make sure parents are on the same page as you when it comes to supporting players and their development?
So what I would do is we would set a clear goal for, let's say, for the season. So for example, if we're talking about those younger with the younger ages, with the U15, with the U9s, we would say, okay, first this season we're gonna focus on the player development. We're not focusing on winning. We're not focusing on results. If we win, that's great. That's a bonus. That's the added on. But we want to focus on player development, and I make sure to keep like an open line between me and the parents. So whenever they have any questions about the players, about their own kids' development, about their own kids' place in the team, I would always make sure to have time for them so we can talk, so we can communicate about that and discuss it in an open-minded way, so we can help each other improve and help their kids improve. Because if there's any tension between the parents and the coach, that's going to affect the kids eventually. So we want to make sure that as a coach, you keep an open mind and you're ready to accept any kind of, it could be criticism, it could be any comment from the parents, and be able to cope with it and turn it into something that would benefit you and benefit the team. That's how I would really usually run my teams.
Yeah, and that's massively important, right? Because I mean, in most cases, so we'll just talk about Best FC and what our typical schedule looks like. They'll train twice a week as a team, and then we train on Fridays with our technical sessions, right? So they're on the field with us 3 days a week, and then we obviously have our tactical sessions that we do online. So maybe a maximum 4 days. If a kid is all in, they're with us 4 days. Majority of the time, and again, those that we're on the field together for an hour and a half, 3 days a week at max, and then uh, 30 minutes to 45 minutes doing our tactical sessions.
Yeah.
But so that leaves the majority of the time is at home with mom and
Yes.
dad, right?
Yes.
The majority of the time, or I should say every time after a training session, or more specifically after a game, they get in
Mhm.
the car and mom or dad go, "Hey, you should have done this. You should have done that. You should
Yeah.
have done this."
Yeah.
And we've all been there as players, right? And we can all remember that time. Um,
Oh yeah.
but now, especially, these players are trying to develop at a higher level, and we're trying to support those players developing at a high level. And I don't think there's anything more discouraging when coach says, "Hey, this is what we're focusing on. This is the direction we want to go. This is what I want us to
Mhm.
be working on." Especially at the U9, U10, we focus
Mhm.
a lot on individual technical development, so that
Mhm.
when we get, the second half of the season, the spring season, or when they move on to 9v9, they understand how to play out of the back. They understand the four phases of the game. They understand the
Yeah.
transitional process, or 1-2s, or overlaps, or they can identify, angles and finding space. And so obviously we use those terms with our players, but
Mhm.
then that player gets in the car with mom and dad and say, well, why didn't you shoot the ball from
But
there? Or,
yeah,
why didn't you do this? Why didn't you go on the other side of the field and go get the ball? Right. And,
yeah,
with very little knowledge of positional awareness or positional
exactly,
responsibilities. Um,
exactly.
so I think it's a great point, is having that, just a quick discussion, email,
Mhm.
keeping the door open. I love communicating with parents. Right, wrong, or indifferent. They may not always agree. They may
Yeah,
see something differently. But at least there's a line of communication there where, okay, maybe I understand where Coach Brian's coming from. He's looking at it like A, B, C, and D. Um,
yes,
and I need to make sure that I'm on that page too, so that my child um, is developing at the level they need to develop at.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, yeah, so I mean, those are the biggest pieces there, when it comes to player development. Obviously, individual players. So how do you build up your own confidence?
Mhm.
How do you, as coaches, how do we build up there and support that confidence and support that development? And obviously, as parents, how do we support, again, their development, which overall supports their confidence? Is there any
Yeah.
advice that you would give to parents on um, ways that they can, further support their player?
I would say uh, that's something we like that our parents actually do and already do, that they give their kids a lot of confidence and support, whether it's during or after the game, and that's great. And it's also, if they want to talk about the game, what it's how they should approach it's how they should approach their kid, and what they should ask their kid. Like, for example, they should, instead of saying you should have done this or that, you can say, okay, what could have we done better here or there? They can take the coach's part and just maybe do it between them and their player and their kid, asking them the right questions at the right time, instead of just criticizing, or not even criticizing, just as you said, just saying, why didn't you take a shot from all the way back? Why didn't you pass? Why didn't you run from your side to the other side? Like, these are parts. These are my bad. These are things that they can do to help their kid improve, instead of just adding more pressure and more stress on them.
Yeah, 1,000%. No, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And if I were to give any advice, I would say, you know, simply ask the player. You get in the car.
Yeah,
Hey, do you want to talk about the game?
yeah,
And if the player says, yeah, I'd love to. Did you see me do this? Or did you see me do that?
yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Or
exactly.
tough game, tough loss. Kid gets in a car. You want to talk about it? No, I'm good. Then let
Yeah,
it be. You know what? Let it
yeah,
be. Um, Obviously, that coach is going to, connect with the team at the next training session. Or I know all of our coaches write up kind of game recap emails,
mhm,
following specific games. So, I think that's where you let it handle it. Again, you said another great keyword, that pressure, right? Taking that pressure off a little
yeah,
bit. Because at the end of the day, you got to remember, these kids, they're not pros. Even at the
yeah,
professional level. I mean, we watched the U.S. women's national team the other day lose against Mexico. There's
yeah,
mistakes that happen all the time, right? And you're like,
exactly,
yikes,
exactly.
but we're dealing with youth players who, and of course, the team took a lot of criticism, players took a lot of criticism, but they're adults.
Yeah,
They're like, okay, kind of let it ride off
yeah,
one shoulder and off the other. But when you're dealing with kids, we always have to be a little bit more cognizant of, listen, like, they're trying.
exactly,
And I think keeping that
exactly.
balance. Another piece that we
Yeah,
talked about it in our tactical session yesterday. So, as you know, we did our 7 weeks this winter of tactical training
mhm,
and soccer IQ and just game
mhm,
awareness. And we broke that down:
mhm,
7v7, 9v9, 11v11. And we kind of recapped everything we covered last night. And then we talked about, again, the confidence piece. What does
yeah,
confidence have to do with the tactical aspect? And one of
yeah,
the things we discussed was, as a teammate,
mhm,
how can you support um, the development of your teammates' confidence? So let's
yes,
touch on that a little bit. Like, what could players on your team, do? And, obviously, there's probably simple answers, but how do you support your teammates in making sure that they're staying confident throughout the duration of a game?
I would say always encouraging them. Like, let's say you had a bad shot on goal, it went wide. Instead of saying what kind of shot was that, or why didn't you pass, you'd say, okay, that's fine. Keep your head up. You get the next one. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Yeah, exactly right, and that's exactly right. That's exactly what we talked about it, right? And
Yeah,
it opens up a lot of eyes because all of us, I've been there as a player. You've certainly been there as a player. We've all been there in the sense of
yeah,
we make I was a goalkeeper my whole life, so I
mhm,
make a save and it goes out for a corner kick, and I'm like, oh man, or I
yeah,
flub and the ball goes in the net. And I'm like, oh man,
yeah.
right? When you're a field player, it's the same idea. You lose the ball, the game
Mhm.
doesn't stop. The
No,
game is still going. You're in
no,
four. It's made up of four phases, right? So you
yeah,
have the ball. You're in the attacking phase. You lose the ball. Rather than throwing your head up and saying,
no,
the game's still going. You're now in the
no.
transitional phase from defending to
Exactly,
attacking, and then
exactly.
obviously defending. And so it's important that the teammates are supporting and building up that confidence, because what you'll recognize is if everybody's supporting everybody, certainly you don't want to be, you know, gloating every mistake, but if everybody's
Yeah,
supporting everybody, like, hey, we got this,
yeah,
like you said, you got this. Let's move on to the next one. You get the next one. Let's
yeah.
go. Let's get
Exactly,
back. Let's back.
exactly.
You got this.
Mhm.
That all of a sudden you've got a field of players that are a different level mentally, right?
Yes,
And they
yeah,
get buzzing and they're flying around and playing for each other.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think it's definitely an interesting way to look at things in
mhm,
perspective, in the sense of technical development, tactical development, physical development
yeah,
massively depends on the psychological pillar of
yes.
player development, right?
That's true. That's true.
And that confidence. You're either going to be confident and you're going to try to do things and make mistakes, or you're not, and you're not going to try to do things and not make mistakes,
No,
and that's where you're at,
no,
you know.
yeah.
Um, no, awesome, man. So, Coach Nabil, greatly appreciate having you on. As always, I'm super excited to keep building out
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank
these
you.
Coaches Corner podcast, and just talk soccer, talk player development. And
Mhm,
players, parents, coaches, clubs alike can
mhm.
kind of can relate and say, "Oh, yeah, good point," or they might say, "Oh, you guys are a bunch of idiots," but hopefully not. But yeah, it's massively important, especially as the sport continues to grow in the
Yeah.
U.S. and we do our best to make sure we're pushing in the right direction.